Hey guys, I'm Pixel Dan, and this is a review of the Masters of the Universe Classics Granamyr. You heard that right. For the first time ever, we have an action figure of the wise old dragon known as Granamyr. Fans of the Filmation cartoon series and the vintage mini-comics will know exactly who this guy is, as he is one of those characters who has been fan-requested for years. This is a character fans have wanted to see a toy of since the vintage line, so now that he's here, let's see how he measures up. Granamyr comes in a fully closed box similar to what we saw with the Wind Raider, which just like that, features some amazing new artwork from the legendary Rudy Obrero, the man responsible for some of the most memorable artwork from the vintage toy line. This box is a piece of art that fans will certainly want to hang on to, featuring a lovely scene of Granamyr sitting in his cave full of treasure. The back of that box shows off some other figures in the Classics line, and of course gives us a brand new bio for Granamyr. Look at the size of this thing! Definitely one of the bigger shipping boxes we've seen so far. And of course, quite a big box that Granamyr himself comes in, featuring that beautiful Rudy Obrero artwork on there. And as you can see, it's kind of cool because it does kind of wrap around on the sides, wraps around onto the top. Very cool design there. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to open this up, show you how Granamyr is packaged within this box, and then we're going to put them together because, as you can see on the front of the box, unassembled. There is some assembly required. So we'll take a look at exactly what we need to do to put this beast together. Alright, so first things first, let's get this box opened up. This is a pretty standard type box that we've seen used in the Masters Classics line, so there's just going to be the tape down the sides, which you can cut pretty easily. This is the way I always open these boxes. Just kind of cut them there, and then that way you can pull the tabs out, and we should hopefully be able to pull everything right out of the box. Alright, there is the beast known as Granamyr. Looks like we do have some instructions in here too. Get that big box out of the way. Alright, so you can see we do have two little blisters on the inside that are housing parts of Granamyr, and then the body is in a poly bag. And then we do have a small sheet of instructions, shows you the contents that are within the box there, and looks like will guide us through putting together our Granamyr figure. So let's go ahead and get this done. Good news is it doesn't look like there's a bunch of twisty ties here, so it's not going to take me forever to undo all the twisty ties to get this guy out. So we'll just take all these parts out of these blister shells. Alright. And get the base body out of the poly bag. Alright, look at all these pieces. All these pieces are going to come together to form our huge Granamyr. Alright, so we do have upper body and a lower body. You can see it's just like a square peg there. Hooks right up inside. Snaps into place. Now I assume this is going to be one of those things where once we put it together, it's not really going to come apart, and it definitely looks like it locks on pretty solid. So once this guy's together, he's probably not going to come back apart, without probably heating up the plastic or something like that. So we got like the neck peg there. It's basically like a larger version of the ones we see on the smaller figures. The head should just pop right on the ball joint here. There we go. Sweet. Kind of get that rolling around there. Awesome. We got the joints for the arms there, just those little socket joints. You can hear them clicking into place. And again, they do lock in pretty good. So once they're in, they're in. And the legs, we have those same bigger kind of squarish shapes for the legs there. And you can see that the belly of this body is hollow. You can tell that because I can actually reach my finger through all the holes here. So it is hollow in this portion. However, the rest of them does feel very solid. This piece is solid, solid head, solid arms. All the rest of it is solid. It's just his belly there. It's empty, empty belly. And then the last piece is the tail, which is also on that same... Help if I didn't knock my microphone off. Alright, so the tail snaps into that same place. And then, you guys are familiar with these. These are our Dragoman wings. And those will just pop into the little ball joint holes here on his back. See if we can get it in there. And one more. And there he is, my friends. There is the massive Granamyr figure all put together. So, let's check this guy out. As stated, Granamyr appeared in both the vintage mini-comics and the Filmation cartoon series. The big difference between the two versions is his skin color. In the comics he was green, and in the cartoon he was red. For this reason, Mattel had fans vote on what color Granamyr would be, and red won. Thus, we have a more Filmation-accurate Granamyr in toy form. He has a terrific sculpt that really captures the wise old look of this dragon. Atop his head sits a metallic purple helmet with horns sticking off the sides. The helmet has some nice scratches and dings in it, so it looks old and worn, just like the dragon. He also has a great amount of detail all over his skin, which is very scaly, and also features creases, cracks, and even warts all over his body. His fingers and toes have very long black nails. The nails are rounded and made of a bit of a softer plastic, no doubt for safety concerns, but it's not overly rubbery. The color of his skin fades from a darker red on his limbs and head to a lighter red on his chest and stomach. You'll also notice some lighter shades of red on his inner arms and legs, which work very well to add some dimension to the overall look. The larger scales on his stomach are colored a light purple and run all along the underside of his tail. His tail comes to a large point at the end, and you'll also notice large spines sticking out of his back that run all down the tail. Alright, so let's take a closer look at Granamyr. Huge figure. Alright, so one of the things that's really great about this guy is the fact that he is still chock full of articulation. So even though he's huge, he's still very posable. Now, as I mentioned earlier, he does have that hollow body, but all of the other pieces on him are nice and solid. So he does have very solid legs, solid arms, the upper body is solid, the head, the tail, all of those pieces are nice, solid plastic. But he is still nice and lightweight. He's not overly heavy by any means. His articulation is actually pretty good. So let's go ahead and break that down. And in order to do that, I will straighten out his legs here, and then we're going to run down all of these pieces. Alright, so as you can see, the head is able to roll all the way around. It's on a nice little ball joint there. Kind of rock around. You can turn it left, you can turn it right, you can make him look slightly up, slightly down, and it does stay in place very well. It's good and tight, works very well. One thing, I gotta point this out unfortunately, it happened pretty much right after I moved his head the first time. I did scratch some paint off of his throat. It does look like it's a dark red body underneath. The plastic used underneath is a darker red, and it just has some lighter red painted over here, but I definitely scratched some of that paint off. So it might be something you want to be careful of when moving his head around. It hasn't happened anywhere else. It just seems to be that one little piece right here. The arms are able to move forwards and backwards. They are not on the ball joints to move up and down. I popped that out pretty easy, actually. goes back in, locks in place, but it does just move up and down. You do have the swivels right above the elbows, as well as the elbow bend. You have a swivel at the wrist, as well as a wrist bend, which is very cool. He doesn't really turn at that torso there where we linked them together. It's pretty solid there. But the legs, you can see the legs do move forwards and backwards, and they're on those nice tight ratchet type joints. So you can kind of hear it in there how tight that is. That is really great. You do have swivels at the knees, as well as the standard knee joints, so you got some great movement there. Swivels at the ankles, as well as an ankle joint. And then rolling around to his backside, you can see that his tail is able to rotate all the way around. And again, just like the legs, it's on that nice tight ratchet type joint. You do have the purple scales underneath the tail, of course, so if you're going to rotate his tail around, it does look a little out of place, but it is possible to rotate it. And then we do have, there is another cut right up here. It doesn't look like that actually rotates, though. Yeah, I thought that was an articulation joint at first, but it looks like that's just where the tail is assembled. You are going to notice a crease that wraps all the way around that tail there. It does not articulate there. It is glued in place and solid. And then lastly, we do have the wings. They work just like the Drago Man wings, so you can kind of rotate those around. They do have the little hinge joints, so you can make them move outwards, and they do stay in place very well. I will note that I really had to push those in tight in order to get those little ball joints to lock into place, but once you get those pushed in there, I haven't had any problems with them falling out. They're staying in very well, and you can see it rotates around very nicely, so lots of articulation there. So quite a bit of posability for this big figure. Much more articulation than we've seen in some of the other big figures like Titus, Megator, and even Procrustes, who had a little bit more articulation. Still not as much as this guy. Now, you saw me straighten his legs out. You can get him like where his legs are all the way down like he's standing up. It is worth noting that he is very top heavy, and therefore you're not going to be able to balance him most likely standing up like this. Mostly because he's got this large tail coming out the back. I mean, I don't know, maybe you can kind of set the tail to keep him standing up, or if you really want him standing up, you can probably have to lean him up against something. But, you know, Granamyr is iconic in the sitting pose. And I can imagine that this is the way most people are going to display this guy, is actually sitting down. This is probably the way that Mattel actually intended him to be able to sit on your shelf, is in this sitting position here. Now this dude, like I keep saying, he is huge. This is the biggest figure we've seen in Masters of the Universe Classics so far. We've not seen a figure this big. I mean, he's like an infant. Look at this. I can rock this dude to sleep. How you doing, Granamyr? It's huge. In this sitting pose, he's about 14 inches tall. If you get him standing up, he's 23 inches tall. He is huge. He's a huge, huge dragon. I love it. Just to kind of give you an example of just how big this guy is, we'll get some of the figures up here, and that way you can see him standing next to He-Man there, and you can see He-Man much smaller than him, of course. We'll get some larger characters out, like the Shadow Beast, and then the Giants. Even the Giants are small compared to Granamyr. Look at Titus here. He's still pretty much a full head shorter than Granamyr is when in sitting down. I mean, you stand this guy up, he towers over everybody. It's amazing. Seriously, this guy is huge. You want some more examples? Well, let's see him next to some other larger toys, like the vintage Castle Grayskull and Crystal Castle. Or how about Eternia? He stands almost the same height as Mattel's Voltron. And he's almost half the size of that new massive Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles playset. This figure really is like a small infant child. Now the figure does tend to work best in that sitting position. He's certainly meant to be displayed that way, as he is flatter on the bottom so that he will sit nicely on your shelf. And since this is iconic for the character, I imagine that is exactly how most folks would display him regardless. I mean, I know that's how I'll be displaying him. As I stated in the beginning, this character has received requests from fans for many years now. He is probably one of the more iconic characters from the classic cartoon that has never seen toy form before, so it's pretty amazing knowing that we now have one. Especially one that is done in such a large scale, with such a great sculpt and amount of articulation. He's a dream figure for many Masters of the Universe fans. And while some folks did hope to see him in his mini-comic green color, I think this at least gives the option of a repaint at some point down the road. I can imagine that most collectors are going to be very happy to add this guy to their Masters collections. I know I, for one, am stoked to finally have the oldest and wisest of the dragons in action figure form. Granamyr will be available on MattyCollector.com on December 17th, 2012, and he's not part of your subscription. So if you want him, you gotta get over to MattyCollector.com. Until next time,